Welcome into this video, everyone. We're going to do a 30-minute Skype session here. What we have are 10 photos from a listener of the Photo Taco podcast. And if you don't know what that is, then you need to go subscribe to the podcast. Go check it out at phototacopodcast.com. I ran a contest during the summer of 2018 where people who subscribed to the podcast and took a picture of their subscription were entered into this contest to win a 30-minute Skype session with me, as I'm going to go through and process their photos in Lightroom so that people can learn a little bit about how to use Lightroom. And Fraser, I think Fraser Bordelot won that contest. And so we're going to go through, these are 10 of Fraser's photos and some good photos here that are really going to be fun to kind of go through. And I'm going to run through them. I'm going to show you how I approach thinking about the photos, why I'm going to change sliders, why I'm going to do adjustments, what I'm going to do inside of Lightroom. We are going to limit it to Lightroom today. We're not going to go into Photoshop, and we'll just show you how I would edit them in Lightroom. So, Fraser, this is your session though. So if you have questions along the way and you'd like to see or maybe understand a little more what I'm doing, have me go a little slower on something, that's all great. It's your 30 minutes, and so let's not wait anymore. Let's get started. All right. Good. So first off, we're in the library module right now. So this is the grid view in the library module. I like to have all of my panels besides the right one hidden so that if you float over them, it's going to change. Just gives you more room to see everything. And normally I edit, so you're seeing this in full HD resolution. Normally I edit at a much higher resolution than that, but to make it so that people can see it well on YouTube, I'm editing at full HD resolution instead. So it's going to be a little bit tighter than I normally would want to do, but that's okay. That's going to be good for the video. And we're in the grid view in the library module, and we're going to just go through these one at a time and go for it. So I'm going to hit D to go to the develop module, and I'm going to mention the hotkeys, the keyboard shortcuts along the way, because it really improves your editing. If you can use the keyboard shortcuts, you're going to be way faster in your editing process. So I'm going to mention them. I'm going to try to make sure I say it out loud as I'm doing it, but I'm going to hit D, and now we're in the develop module. And currently I'm in the view where I can see everything in full screen, and I even have some of the metadata about the image up there. You get that by hitting the I key. So that's another keyboard shortcut. I turns on. The first view is this one where you kind of see the date timestamp and the resolution of the image. And then if you hit it again, now it shows your exposure and stuff like that. And that's the only reason I have it on for this is just a learning thing. It's another thing that people can look at and understand kind of what was going on as they took the photo, what their settings were, and it's a good thing to do. All right, so let's talk about this lovely image. So first off, the concept is so good. You have layers, and that's an important thing to do in landscape photos. You need to have a foreground, a middle ground, a very clear subject, which the tree is, and then some background elements. And this hill and the sky. The sky looks really neat. I love this photo. This is a very good one, Fraser. The challenge, of course, is the telephone lines, which we talked just before we started recording. That's a big challenge, and he wasn't sure how to address that. So let's. The unfortunate thing is that's not really easy to do in Lightroom. So you do have this tool over here. This is the spot removal tool, and you can use it, and you can paint like a line across it and try to get rid of that power line. And it's what Lightroom's going to do is it's going to try to use like some reference data from the photo, and you can see it decided just above the power line. It looked across the whole photo, and it was trying to see where can I pull pixels that look similar to kind of go over the top of the line. And you have two options on how this brush will work. You have clone and you have heal. And so right now it's healing, so it's going to try to change the pixels a little bit, make it so it's not an exact copy. If it's clone, it's just an exact copy of the pixels, and you can see how it kind of changed. But with heal, it's not an exact copy, and you can play around with some feathering and opacity and try to make it look good. You can even move the reference point. So Lightroom decided to use it from here. You can go to like here, and that's a little better. It doesn't look quite as obvious. And if I click off of the tool, it looks decent. Although right in here, I can see some remnants of like something that looks a little different, and I don't like that so much. But the problem is, as you keep using the tool, first off, the rest of the processing slows down. So you don't want to do this your first step like we are doing here, because everything else in the editing is going to slow down. All of the slider changes that you make, everything else is going to be really slow. So you don't want to do this first. And really, you don't want to do this kind of spot removal in Lightroom at all. You want to round trip into Photoshop and use the healing brushes and the other tools that you have in Photoshop, where that's out of scope for this this little recording session. So I'm not going to go show you that today in this video, but and you can give it a try to do this, but that is going to be a problem. And maybe we'll come back to it after we do, but let's deal with some of the other things. Now, the histogram is super important to me as I edit my photos. And if you don't know how to use or read the histogram, then go check out my podcast episode. There I have one called Histogram Explained over at phototacopodcast.com. You can go find that podcast episode. It's about a 45-minute audio episode of describing the histogram, what it means, how you use it a little bit. Plus, I'm working on coming pretty soon in 2019. There's going to be some video training available over at phototacopodcast.com where I connect the dots a lot more than we're going to do in this session today about histogram. There's no such thing as a perfect histogram. That's kind of one of the misnomers or one of the myths. But this is slightly underexposed. And maybe it's okay. Maybe you're going after a moody photo. But just to play around with it, I would want to just see. And some of this, and maybe I just should hit reset so we can see where there was a starting point. I think I applied a preset. And now that I look at the original, it wasn't actually overexposed. This is perfect exposure on the scene. So Fraser, you did an excellent job of getting the exposure on this. And the reason I say that is you really want to try to go for a histogram that is kind of almost touching on the left and almost touching on the right. That's the histogram you want to go after. It doesn't matter where the peaks are. So a lot of people get confused that it's like should be this bell pattern thing where the peak is right in the middle and it falls off evenly on both sides. And there's going to be some photos where that's true, but that doesn't mean it's a perfect histogram. What we want, and as you're taking the photo and you look at histograms on your camera, we want it to almost be touching here and almost be touching here. And that's a really good, nice exposure. All right. So we do have some room though. It's not quite touching. And I like to be able to try to do that. I also usually on landscapes, I like to try to bring down the highlights. So you can see as I do that, it starts to bring out some of the depth in the sky in particular, which is good. And we could try doing a filter on this in Lightroom so that we only affect the sky instead of the rest of the elements. But I kind of like where that took it right there, just to do that. And I only took it about halfway. I'd also want to see, like, if I bring up the shadows, what does that do? And I kind of like it a little bit too. Now, it's going to depend a lot on your own personal preferences here. If you want it to be more of a moody kind of photo, you can even like play around with changing it so that the shadows are darker. But I kind of like them brightened up just a little bit. I still want that green hill to show up some. All right, now this is the place. I usually want to increase contrast on landscape photos. Almost always I take it up just a hair. I also usually want to increase clarity. Now, you can go way overboard like that taking clarity all the way up. That is not a good idea. I mean, some people like the look that is, but over time, I think you're going to find that that's just not a great look for your photos. They look too crispy, too crunchy. It looks processed. It looks edited. And that's not what you want to go after. You're trying to draw the subject, the eye, to the tree. You're trying to draw out the subject. You're not trying to make them notice your post-processing. And so going over the top for just to see what it looks like is fine. And that's a good thing to do on a lot of the sliders, is to go over the top. And then you dial it back until you feel like, okay, now I'm in a place where that's better. And I know by experience, I usually like it more around the 20-ish range. And so that's normally where I'm going to go. I also love to do vibrance on landscape, on a lot of shots, actually. The vibrance slider, and the difference between it and saturation is skin tones they try really hard to protect skin tone. So in portraits, you don't even want to play with saturation. You want to only use vibrance. And I like kind of doing it in landscapes too. I just like the effect of the vibrant slider better than the saturation slider. Again, you can go way too much, and now you can see that just changes how stuff looks, and makes it look really like unnatural up in the sky here. You don't see a sky that has greens that are that prominent normally. So you don't want to take it up too far. But I like having the colors be increased just a little bit. And so I'm going to leave it about there too. Now, we still have room. We're not touching either side. And so we have room to get more overall contrast in the photo by changing the white and the black sliders. And I'm going to hold down the Alt key, which is the same on Windows and Mac. And and then that changed to all black. And I'm going to start increasing the whites. And so I'm going to the right and increasing the whites. So you can see in the histogram how it's moving. And it's making the white brighter. And now I hit a point where Lightroom is telling me, you can see that arrow up here in the upper right hand side. You can see that that's changed to be white. If I go back down a little bit, it's changing. Oops, and now I'm hitting the black slider. Let's reset that. Okay, now so it went from like a lighter gray to white, and that means it's starting to make stuff pure white on the screen, which isn't necessarily bad. So as I keep going, you see there's parts of a cloud there that went pure white. And that's okay, because that was probably actually pure white when you shot it in the photo. We're not worried about, this is called being blown out. It's what a lot of photographers call it. We're not worried about that because it was probably actually true white in the scene. But if you start taking it up a lot, now you can see that whole sky is blown out and we've lost all the detail. You can't see that fine detail. You're even so bright, you're starting to lose detail in the tree itself because you took the whites way too far. So we're going to back that down, and it's okay to start taking it to the point where you have some little bits of the photo that are pure white. And then same on black. I want to lower the blacks. I want to extend that histogram so it's touching the other edge. And as I go, you can see it turned blue right there. It turned a dark blue. Lightroom is telling me that the blue channel, the blues in the scene, there are pieces of the blues that now look purely black. All right. Okay. So as I look at that, it's happening here in the fence and in the tree trunk and so on. And that's okay to have that be pure black. It's touching the edge of the histogram. And now I have a scene that has a lot of contrast. Contrast helps us to see details. It helps us to notice the elements in the photo. And I'm going to hit the backslash key. So that's the slash that looks like it's leaning to the left on your keyboard. And that shows the before. So there's the before and there's the after, and it just brings out the information in a way that looks really appealing. And I might evaluate again my highlights. That's still pretty bright. It's all personal preference about where you're going to take it. But if I take it down a little bit more, say start to see a little bit more detail in the sky, and that's something I'd really like to do. It looks like maybe there's more trees back here. That's why there's that green in the sky there. So that's good. All right. Okay, so I kind of like where that ends up. And you can see the histogram is not, it's this like U-shaped almost kind of thing. And that's okay. There's no such thing as a perfect histogram. I want it to kind of show up on the left and the right. I didn't change the exposure because I didn't want any kind of global changes made to the histogram. If when we started that histogram was very one-sided, like way more to the left and almost no information from the middle to the right, then I'd increase the exposure slider. If it was the other way and it was almost all stacked to the right and there was very little from middle to the left, then I would decrease the exposure. But in this case, Fraser nailed the exposure enough that I didn't want to play with it. Okay, now let's move on to some other things. Tone curve. On this one, I don't think I want to mess with the tone curve. And the reason is because of the shape of this histogram. When I decide I'm going to use the tone curve, it's because I have a histogram that's more of that bell-shaped kind of histogram where there's a peak kind of in the middle and then tails off on both sides. And then there's a kind of an S-curve or way to use this. Maybe we'll see it in a different photo. For this one, I don't think the tone curve is going to make a big difference. Now, HSL panel. And by the way, Adobe put these panels in this specific order because their experience, their engineers, their design of the application was to work with it in this order. And so it is a good idea to kind of go through it in the order of the panels. You don't have to. You can, of course, change things. And on some, it just screams so much to me to make a specific adjustment that I skip and I go to a different one because it's just bugging me. And all I can focus on is changing some element in the photo. So I'll jump straight to that if there's something just screaming out at me. But in this case, it was just, it's a nice photo to have that way. So I'm going in order. Okay, so saturation is a really great thing to be able to play with. And if you want to bring out some colors in your photo, this is where you're going to go do it. You can do it through saturation and luminance. So saturation, I think of it of like how hard someone would press with the crayons if they were using crayons. Saturation deals with like how much of the color is there. And then luminance deals with how bright that color is. So if you want a color to look brighter, you increase the luminance. If you want it to look deeper, like you pressed harder with the crayon, then you're going to play with the saturation. And in some cases, this one I can tell is from Canon because it's a .cr2 file. Canon cameras, for example, are notorious for oversaturating the reds. And sometimes that means you actually can't see some of the detail in objects that are red because it's oversaturated and the detail's hidden. They're just, they pressed way too hard with the red crayon as they were making that image, and you lose detail. You lose like what strokes would have been darker and softer. And so backing down, reducing the saturation of some colors can really bring out details. And it's good to play with that just to see. In this one, because we have so much green, it would be good to just kind of play around with the green and see what it looks like. So if you desaturate it, that brings kind of, one kind of thing to your image. And in this case, because the hill is a different shade than the tree, that can actually bring a little bit more separation between the tree and the hill. As it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it just looks fake. It looks overprocessed and overdone. So we don't want to do that. But if you de-emphasize that hill a little bit by coming here and reducing the saturation some, that can be a way to try to isolate your subject from the other things and make it so that it's not about the green hill, which was so colorful that could be a challenge. It's more about the tree. And the other thing we could do is try to increase the yellows. So bring it up so that tree stands out a little bit more from the rest of the background. Since the tree, to me, looks very much like the main focus of this photo. That's really what we want to emphasize. All right, so I kind of like those adjustments. And then I like to go back to the original just to see how it looks compared to the original. And, the other thing we didn't ever play with at all back here was white balance. I didn't change that. We had it as shot. And I liked the white balance was there, but it might be fun to play with it just to see. Now, this looks like it might have been maybe a little bit more towards the evening time when it was shot. I guess if I looked at the image, 5 p.m. All right, so that would mean normally a little bit of blue, so we can play around with it and just add some blue to see what we like. And I don't like that at all. I don't like changing it so it's more blue. Changing it to be more yellow, you could get kind of a different season feel. The other thing that does is it really kind of brings out some more detail here in the hill behind, which is kind of a cool thing to have just a little bit there. I don't want to emphasize it. That's not the subject of the photo, but to kind of make it so you can see it. So I like that. The other thing, it's because there's so much green, I might try adding some pink just to see what it looks like. And you go over the top, of course, and you can see where it is, and then back down to a point where it looks kind of normal, and that's still pretty okay. Right in there, I kind of like the way that looks. It's not to say that the white balance was poorly done out of camera. It's just you have options. We have a raw file here. White balance is something in particular that you get to play around with because you have a raw file. There's not nearly as much room in a JPEG file to go and do that. So this is a great way to be able to try to bring out some more. Now I'm going to check again before and after. You can kind of see now that before looks pretty green. It looks very green in the shadows. And I really like how it made the clouds look whiter. Maybe it's still just a touch too much on the pink, on the magenta. So I'm going to back that off just a little bit more. But I kind of like now where that's ended up as far as color balance. And this is a good kind of way. I'm kind of glad I went through it that way, because just because you left a panel doesn't mean you don't reconsider something. If you look at something and you've changed something about it, and you want to make sure that you're getting the best out of it, it's just fine. Go back to that panel. It's no big deal. All right, so we've got that kind of sorted out. I like where that is. I do want to play a little bit with the blues too. We have some blues in the clouds here. I might try to see just what does it look like. I might decide it looks terrible, but what does it look like if I increase the saturation of some of the blues? So I'm gonna just play with it. I'm gonna increase the blues, and you can see the fence goes blue. That's not good. We don't want the fence to be blue. In fact, that fence, because of the time of day, looks really pretty blue anyway. So you might want to just change the saturation even down some on the blues. Or we can go do some more targeted stuff in the sky itself to try to bring out some of the colors. I wish that the sliders, so that would be something like let's say this gradient filter. It's the long one. Here's the long vertical gradient filter. So you can bring in a filter, and we can kind of define where it's going to be. This is going to be all, because I dragged it down, this is where it's going to affect it. In fact, I'll hit the O key, which stands for overlay, and that shows you where the filter is being applied. It shows you what is being touched. And you can see I don't have it currently, so it's 100% here, and then it goes from here, from where this line is to this line, it slowly gradient will take the filter off. It starts to be not applied, and then all the way through to the bottom here. So with here, it's about halfway applied at this line, and then by this line, it's not applied at all. And you can kind of see the red shows you roughly how much it's applying. And you can't really bend the filter to follow these lines. You could use, say, an adjustment brush and try to paint in here to make it fit better. But I'm just going to make it so that the line kind of covers right up to the hill there. And we have it. Now I'm going to hit the O key again to turn off the overlay view so that I can see what I'm working on again. And now you can play around with it with just the sky. So I had an effect applied there that I don't want. So I double clicked on effect and it reset all the sliders. All right, so I'm going to play with, let's see what happens if you reduce the highlights a little bit more. And I kind of like reducing those highlights just a touch more still. And then shadows, I think I might even see, I want to bring a little more contrast to this. So I kind of like taking the shadows down just a bit here too. And you can even play with the sliders here, whites and blacks. So now that this is applied, I'm only going to be adjusting. If I do the blacks up or down, I'm only adjusting where the filter is, where the gradient filter is. And I kind of like taking those blacks down a bit too. I don't think I really want the whites raised up much, because now right here, it's really starting to get white. So I'm just going to double click, and if you double click on a single slider, it just resets to 0. So I'm going to leave that there. You can take the clarity up some just to see what it looks like, and I don't want to do that. I don't like how that is. You can also play with dehaze, and I love this. It's just a different sort of contrast, and as you do it, you can see like the clouds sort of melt away with the way that contrast works, depending on what you were going for. If you wanted it to, so you can see that hill behind it and all that's there, you might like that. Or you can kind of cloud it up even more by taking that dehaze slider to the left. And I think I kind of like clearing it up just a touch. It adds more dimension and depth to it. Now, do we care about all of this being very sharp? We probably don't. And so you could play around with sharpness and add noise reduction, especially if it's a sky. Adding some noise reduction right here would be good. The other thing we can do, I really only want it to be applied to the sky. So I have the tree that's in scope right now. Like, it's part of the filter is the tree, and I don't want it to touch the tree. So this is a fairly new feature in Lightroom called Range Mask, and you can tell Lightroom, I only want you to apply the filter to either a certain color set or a certain luminance. So, and then you control the sliders. We're going to try luminance, the brightness, because there's a big difference between the brightness of the sky and the brightness of the tree. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to lower the bottom part, and it's starting to, you can see now as I did that, it's now ignoring. You can see some of the places where it started ignoring things, and it's because of the luminance value of those. If I go all the way up, you can see now it's really only on the clouds. Like that's it. The clouds that are in the sky, the very widest of the clouds. I don't want it to be quite that little, so I'm going to go about there. And I have made it so that my gradient filter is only being applied to the brightest elements in here, and it's really leaving the tree alone. It's not on the tree much at all. All right, so I'm going to click off the gradient filter, and now let's do a before and after. So it's pretty good. I like the way that those edits are going. It's going. I like it. It's emphasizing the things I want to emphasize, and that's a good thing. All right, split toning. You can make highlights if you have some challenges with like skin tones not looking good, or there's a white. So we have right here in the shadows, we have kind of a blue on the fence, right? You can try to adjust them in here. It's a little touchy. It's a little complicated. I don't use split toning all that much, unless I'm going after an artistic effect where I kind of want the shadows to have a specific kind of tone to them. So trying to adjust it to fix something, to take something out, I don't find this to be the best way. If you really wanted this fence to be more white, and maybe we'll just go ahead and do that. I use an adjustment brush. It's much easier. Again, double clicked on this effect area to reset it all. And then I just use my mouse scroll wheel to increase the size of it. And I'm just going to paint over the fence. And it's currently set to auto mask. So it's trying really hard to only try to detect the edges and only select the parts that I want. But I'm just going to select all of the fence. And I'm going to do this because I'm going to use that range masking again. And I'm going to hit O to turn it off. And then I'm going to just add some yellow so that that fence goes whiter. Okay, but now you can see it kind of bled off into the grass. Now the grass looks kind of yellowish too. So now I'm going to use my range mask again, and I'm going to go to color this time. And I'm going to select the color of the fence. And now, if I hit O, you can see it did a pretty good job of making it so that mostly only the fence is being selected. Bled off a little bit here. So if I return that color picker and I hit the Alt key to this is now, I'm removing the filter. And so I can make sure as I go over kind of this top part that it's not doing anything on this area. And it kind of did that because the path here is similar color, similar. All right, so now hit O again, so I don't see it. And we could do other things too, like you can desaturate. If you want it to look white, then you can just turn off saturation. When you take out all the saturation, it looks whiter. You can also increase the exposure, so you can make that fence really kind of pop out, which we don't really want. Or we can try just increasing the highlights, which is going to be a much more subtle effect to making that fence look white. All right. So pretty happy with that. Look at before and after. Now that fence just looks downright blue on the before. And so I really like how that made that look really white there. And so that's a good thing. All right, let's move on to detail. So sharpening. Sharpening is definitely something that you're going to have to develop your own taste for. I like a fair amount of sharpening on a lot of my photos out of raw files. And I do want to say that by the reason that Adobe put it in here where by default you automatically get some sharpening. So this isn't because of any changes or adjustments. This is because this is where Adobe puts it. In general, photos need this kind of sharpening, especially raw files. Raw files need sharpening. And it's just a part of every single camera. It doesn't matter which one you have, they need sharpening. So this is their kind of default. It's conservative. It's something where it kind of depends on what your subject is and what you're going to do. Now, so I'm going to start with the bottom slider here, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and now everything that's white gets sharpened. So, and you can remember that because by default, everything is sharpening. The whole thing is white. But we don't want every bit of this sharpened. We really want to sharpen so that the tree is what we're noticing. We want to make it so that it stands out and the edges of the tree are visible. So as I slide, I'm holding down Alt, and as I slide, I'm going to change it until the sharpening is really being applied more to the tree and the leaves than the sky. I don't care about the sky being sharpened. In fact, we kind of want it to not be. So I'm gonna go about right there. I like where that balance lies between the sky, the grass, and the tree. I want the edges of the tree and the details of the tree to be sharpened, but I don't want the rest of it to be sharpened very much. So I'm gonna go right there. Now we haven't changed a lot of the other things yet to make it so that we can really see what's going on. Now I'm gonna zoom in, and I'm gonna zoom in right here because I want the sharpening to look good on this part of the tree. So I zoomed in. All right, and now we have it at, if I float over here, I'm at a 1:1 right now. You can zoom in even more by changing the zoom level here in the navigator. You can choose between a whole bunch of different zoom levels, but this is good. This is exactly where I want to be. So I'm going to take the sharpening all the way up to a ludicrous amount. That's going to be, there's no way you'd ever want to add this much sharpening to a photo. But I want to see the effects. And first off, I'm going to change the details, and I'm going to just lower it until I start to see some of the pixelation, especially here in the grass, some of the noise like be de-emphasized or the pixelation be de-emphasized. And so I'm going to go, I think around, well, and I may come back to some of these as I'm adjusting them. I'm going to go about there. Okay, and then the other thing we can do is we increase the radius. That's telling Lightroom to try harder to find edges in the photo and emphasize those edges, make the contrast on those edges more defined. So I wouldn't say it's like if you missed focus, you can get the focus back. That's not how this is going to work, but it will make it so that the focused areas of the image, the edges are more defined. And it really helps kind of to hold down Alt, and you can kind of see now how that's happening as I move that slider around. If I have it all the way over here, the edges are just kind of soft and blended together. And as I move it over, it gets there. But if you go so far, like it just becomes ridiculous and looks overdone. It looks over-processed when you take it all the way over. So you want to try to find a balance, something that's in between. And, I'm going to try around there. And then I'm going to reduce, I end up usually around an 80 or so on the sharpening, but you just kind of need to play with it and see where the slider goes, what it is you want to do. I'm going to try around there. Now, while we're here, we're also going to do noise reduction. And there's some noise, yet it was ISO 800 when you shot this. Noise isn't bad. It's just a reality that we have to deal with. Some cameras, of course, are better at it than others. But it's not necessarily bad, but there is a little bit of noise in here. So and it's going to kind of undo a little bit of your sharpening as you do it. So you might have to add some noise reduction and then increase some sharpening, add some sharpening back in so that you can do it. But I'm going to just, so as I do that, you can see the leaves softened quite a bit, and I don't want to go that far. So I'm going to go there, and then I'm going to play around with the amount again on the sharpening. And I think I'm just going to leave it about there. All right, now I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to hit the slash key so we can see before and after. And it's not immediately obvious that the sharpening's there, which is good. We don't want to draw a huge amount of attention to it. But I like where we've ended up. All right. Lens corrections is a good thing to do. I usually turn it on just to see. And let's see. So this was an EF 75-300. I'll say Canon, and it said, yep, that's an EF 75-300 lens. And now it's Adobe's done the work to kind of figure out what kinds of normal distortions and things are there with that particular lens. And sometimes as you do that, it's going to remove vignetting. Lenses usually have some vignetting where it might get dark around the edges. And so you might have to revisit some of the stuff you do. But the reason you wait to turn this on is now, if you have this stuff on before you do these sliders, now down Lightroom has to make sure it's constantly kind of checking with the lens profile as you make changes from there. It's going to slow stuff down. So don't want to do that while you're doing it. I like it at the end here because of that reason. And then just remember that it could change some of the stuff you've altered. And so you might need to go back and revisit some of the stuff you've done, especially looking at the edges to see how it's changed anything. All right, transform. So we do have kind of a hill here that you could try to straighten out. But there's not a lot of room around it. And if you do try to straighten it, so let's just try it and see what it looks like. If you do try to make that nice and straight, and you'll notice as I'm moving it, it's the the fence went blue again, and Lightroom has to, just to make it so that the rotation stuff can be fast and you can see where it is, it has to turn off some of the adjustments that you've been doing to this point. So this actually is fine to do right at the beginning too. This is one of those things, like I said, I might jump to the beginning, I might jump to a different panel, and it's because of this. If the photo, like if there's a very horizon in the landscape shot that's not straight, it just kills me until it's straight. So I jump to this and do it right at the beginning, and there's no harm in that. That's not going to really make Lightroom slower. So as I release now, as I release that slider to make that path straighter, now we can see how it looks. And then if you turn on constrained crop, because what this means is it doesn't have any pixels to add in here, then it will kind of auto crop in so there's no whites that are there. And now you can kind of judge, is that better or worse than before? So you have before and after. And I kind of like the path being straightened out. Now, it's not to say that it was taken horribly, like out of camera, that Fraser should have straightened that up, because maybe you're on a hill and that was actually kind of straight. It's just, you can do it afterwards. So why not take a look? And if it doesn't work, then, you don't do it. You don't straighten it. But in this case, I think it did work. Okay, so we're kind of getting towards the end of this. One other thing I want to do, I want to highlight this tree just a little bit more. And you could try to do it with the effects panel, and you can do some post-crop vignetting. And since it's right in the middle, that might work pretty well. But I like to have a little more control over it. So instead, I'm going to use a radial filter, and I'm going to draw around the tree. And I want to affect everything but the tree. And there we go. So if I hit O, you can see where it's going to affect it. It's going to affect the outside of the tree. And I might want to go kind of like this right here. All right. So now I'm going to hit O again, turn off the overlay. And I want the tree to be highlighted. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the highlights. I'm going to make it so that the tree becomes more of the emphasis of the photo, and that's not really doing it enough. So now I'm also going to change the exposure down just a little bit here, and you can see now that parts of the tree are becoming brighter rather than the borders, and it's helping to draw the eye attention to that tree. I might want to go even just a little bit more up and out here. Okay. So I did that, and you can go really far on this, obviously, and make it look like that. Well, that's not really what I want. I want it to blend a little bit more than that, but maybe somewhere around there in changing the exposure. Now, in doing that, the whites have really come down, and so maybe I'll change the highlights back, bring that back just a little bit, and let's see. I also I just want to draw attention to it. I'm going to desaturate the outer edges just a touch, not a whole lot, but just make it so that the attention comes here instead of on the edges, and then maybe you could even take the sharpness down just a little bit on those edges and add some noise reduction. Just make it so that there's more. We don't care if this gets a little bit softer, because that's not the emphasis. This is the emphasis right here. This is what we want people to focus on. Okay, so I kind of like where that went. Now, before and after. And it's not huge, not dramatic. It's not such a massive thing that people are going to notice it. But I like the way that that's just a little bit drawing attention into the tree away from the background. The other thing I probably would play with on this one, the edges here aren't adding a ton to the photo. So just to try it out, I'm going to go to an 8x10 size, and I'm going to hit the X key to make it so it's portrait orientation. And just to see what it's like if I bring it so that more of just the tree is in focus here. So let's see. Can't really, whoops. I can't really move it a whole lot because I run out of room on the edge. And let's just see what it looks like. It kind of lost a lot. We chopped off so much. I don't really like that change. So I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to go back to as shot. And I'm going to leave it like it is. Okay, so now obviously the power lines would be the thing to do next, and it's just not going to be great inside of Photoshop to do it. We'll give it a try again. We'll go right here, and I would say don't do like the entire line. Do it one little bit at a time. And I don't want this tree to be part of it at all, so I'm going to change I'm going to tell Lightroom to sample from a different area. And you can see I didn't do a good job of getting the power line in here very well. So if I paint a little bit more, and it's so slow now because of all the other adjustments that I have in there. So it is a good step to, well, it just does this better in Photoshop. So I think we're going to move on, if you're okay, Fraser, to the next picture.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. We've already gone 40 minutes here. So let's do one more. So which other one would you like to have me go through? Since we'll just do one more.
Any of them really. How about maybe that train tunnel one, I guess.
The train tunnel one right here?
Yes.
All right. Very cool shot. Where is this?
That's in Italy.
Italy. That sounds fun.
It was a great trip.
All right. So first off, I am going to go and change it so that this horizon line gets straight. So I'm going to go over here. And on this one, you can try the auto on the upright and see how it did. I don't like how it did it. So I'm going to do guided instead. And with guided, you draw lines of what you want to be straight. So I'm going to draw a line right there and say, that line I want to be straight. And I'm even going to try this one, and this will help on perspective too. I'm going to try saying, I want to see what it looks like, Lightroom, if you try to make that line straight too. All right. So now it kind of adjusted the perspective even of where things are. And before and after, you see the perspective changed quite a bit. It would be better if I had another line to be straight too. I don't know that I really liked how it did it, so I'm going to do it myself. And I'm going to go like that. And constrain crop. Okay, so this one was the one I wanted more than this one. That one's okay. To me, my eye, that's fine to have it be like that. It's very blue, probably because of the time it was shot again, to me. So, and I'm going to just try it. All of this stuff you just play around with to see what you like. So I'm going to try adding some yellow just to balance out the blue a little bit at least. And I kind of like where that is. All right, let's see. Oh, and we have some settings that are in here. So the highlights are already dialed down. And that's too much probably. So we're going to, in fact, you know what? First I'm going to do a reset on this. Because I forgot there was some presets applied as I imported them. Okay, going back to this, let's do, transform. Let's rotate the image again. And I'll hit constrain crop. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to increase the yellow. There we go, to right there. I like that better. And then we'll try decreasing the highlights just to see if it brings out, and it does. It brings out some more detail in the sky. So that's good. I am going to increase the contrast. I'm going to not talk quite as much about why I'm doing stuff. All right. Well, I think I'm going to paint. I'm going to paint over here and add some more yellow just to that part in the sky. We want the water to look kind of bluish, but I think in the sky I'm going to paint some white balance adjustments. Shadows, I don't think I want to raise those. We have a little bit of room. I'm going to do the whites and set it. I'm going to go till about right there where the very top of the clouds are pure white. And then black. That tunnel, it's okay to be black. That's just fine to have that tunnel be fully black. So now I have some good contrast through the photo. If I look at before and after. Okay. Clarity, I'm going to bring that up so I'm going to go too far. That's way too much. And then dial it back. Okay. I don't know if I really want vibrance to be bigger here. I think I may just go to the HSL panel to do that. All right, let's go to the HSL panel. All right, so I like the greens. I want to play around with yellows being more saturated, just so that they look more even with the greens on their saturation level. I'll also play around with like more blue, I like the effect on the water, and I'm planning to change the sky anyway. So I like having that saturation up. If I hit slash to kind of look, all right, might even be able to go some more on the blue. I kind of like that effect in the water of the blues being bright, being deeper. You can also have it look deeper because if you change the luminance value, it's going to change how light or dark it is, but it makes the colors kind of bigger too. All right, now let's make the sky look a little bit whiter. So I'm going to paint in here, and I like to paint with overlay on so I can see where I've painted. And because I have masking on, you can see it didn't select the mountain. It's avoiding the mountain there, which is perfect because I don't really want the mountain to be impacted here. Lightroom's doing a pretty good job. We have some strong edges for it to find, and it's not touching those. I really just want the sky here. And it's all the personal taste, like I said at the beginning. This is, if you want the sky to look blue and overcast with it, that's great. But I kind of want to separate these things. I want the water, the mountain, and the sky to look three different elements. And so now if I take the saturation down, now that looks whiter, and I'm going to add some yellow. All right, so I kind of like that. Now, because we have the sky there, I also am going to play around with like changing the highlights and the shadows and the blacks and the whites. If I change the blacks, now I can bring out more of those clouds and the whites. And I don't want, okay. So we're going to leave the whites where they were. All right, and let's just play around with the shadows going darker too. I'm going to see more detail in the sky. All right, so I think I'm pretty happy with where that's at right there. So that now I just changed that sky. Whoops. And before and after. So you can see that just the clouds are brought out about as much as they were before. All right. All right, so now I will go to the detail panel. Change that so that the sky is not being edited as much. I'm going to increase the sharpness here to too much and change the detail level. And I may want to go zoom in so I can see the detail. And that's pretty good right there. I like that. And then the radius, if I bring it up, then it really, yeah, there we go. All right, I kind of like it there. Take it back down so that it's not so over the top on the sharpening. All right, that's pretty good. Okay, so that's looking good there. We have ISO 400. I might go in a touch, and I don't think we need any noise reduction at all. Okay, so kind of went through that. Now we're going to apply the lens corrections and see what that does. I don't see that it really changed anything. All right, so that's looking pretty good. I like that. So there you go. That's pretty good. I might this building right here, I might try to take that into Photoshop and see if I could clone that out.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Yeah, just to get rid of it. But let's see if we can get it to happen in Lightroom. See if Lightroom can deal with it. Maybe if I use the water, may as well try. It may look awful. That is not where we want it sampled from. All right. And yeah, this is just not, Lightroom is not up to the task. of cloning that building out. So you'd have to go into Photoshop to do that. I think we can try by doing clone, but then look how obvious it is. Just way too obvious. So just not a task for Lightroom. The other thing you could do is try to crop in and just take the building out of it. And that actually kind of does a good thing too, because now your tunnel is on the thirds line. And are you really missing much by not having that there? I mean, the mountain tailing off is a cool thing, and I'd rather have it if I could. I'd rather have that in there if I could. But to get the building out and make it a faster kind of edit, overall, that's not a bad thing right there. That actually looks pretty good. Now you don't have to deal with the building. So that's kind of neat. Kind of like that. The other thing is the green is just huge. We got so much green. So I'm going to just try changing the green down on the saturation and try not to have that be like, wow, green photo. All right. So right there. Now the difference between the two. So I like it. I like how that's turned out. I like the detail of it. Now that I look at before and after here, and I don't know if you can see it, Fraser, very good, but I've gone over the top on the sharpening. So I'm going to reduce that some more. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go down some more here. And it's just by eye. I'm just totally eyeing it and have my own preferences on how that looks. So there we go. All right. That's what I would do to that photo. I might go now that I've done some adjustments, I might go back and look at the blacks again and whoops, not lowering them, increasing them. I'm okay with stuff being pure black. And then the whites, we have room. Now that we kind of went and touched the sky, we have room to end up where we can get some pure whites. So that just adds more contrast. You can see that it just draws out the details of the photo quite a bit more. And the clarity might be still a little bit too much. So I'm going to just knock that down some. There we go. I like that better. All right. That's a much better edit of that photo. Okay, Fraser, we went like almost twice the time and I didn't get to very many of your photos. But hopefully that was that helpful?
It's greatly helpful. I picked up a lot of tips there. I wasn't aware of that rangefinder tool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fairly new. I think it was 2 releases ago. So probably about 6 months ago, early 2018, that was added. So it's a cool thing. It's in the gradient filters and that's pretty cool. I think it was also, it's also in the adjustment brush. So that helps you really fine tune your selections quite a bit more, make it look better. So. All right.
I forgot about those. Holding down Alt. That was a good reminder there too.
Yes, Alt is a really big deal.
When you're doing the sharpening.
Yeah, sharpening or whites. So on the whites now I can see exactly where it is. Now you can kind of get the same view by going up to these arrows. And if you float over them, it shows you the area that's getting technically blown out. In this case with the blacks, it's pure black. There's nothing else. There's no differentiation in those pixels. They're all pure black. And you can press it and now it will stay on. If you press that arrow, it'll stay on. So it shows the whole time. And that's okay. That's helpful. But I like it kind of be more temporary and seeing it without all of the detail by holding down Alt and then pressing on it. Now I can see it kind of in more of a context, and it makes it so you can tell a lot better. To me, where stuff's being pure white, pure black, and then and being able to see that, so that's good. The other thing I'd probably try for this one, I'd probably try in Photoshop to clone this stuff out too, the retaining wall stuff that's up here, so that we could get rid of it. But it's pretty good. I like the image. It's really fun. It's a cool looking scene right here, and but being an overcast day, that really helps that too.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks so much for entering the contest, and I hope you enjoyed it. So I hope you'll stay listening to the Photo Taco podcast.
I sure will.
All right. Thank you for your time, Fraser.
Thank you, Jeff.
Bye-bye.